I don't know if people always forget that these calls are recorded or if people just don't care. Exchange I love yous, him calling her a good girl, and there's also recordings of them having phone sex. Hello, my name is Crystal. Welcome to my channel. Please like, comment, and subscribe. I hope you're having a great day. Today we'll be discussing Vicky White and Casey White. There is a Netflix documentary about their case called Jailbreak, Love on the Run. Today I have my pre-workout with a scoop of creatine. Gotta work out after this. Let's dive into the story. So first, Casey White and Vicky White have no relation. They just happen to have the same last name. Let's start by discussing Vicky. Vicky was a corrections officer that worked at Lauderdale County Detention Center in Florence, Alabama. Lauderdale County Detention Center is considered a holding facility for inmates. The inmates in there can have charges from capital murder all the way down to a speeding ticket. Vicky worked there for 17 years and worked her way up to Assistant Director of Operations. Over the course of 17 years, Vicky won Employee of the Year 4 times, and Vicky overall was considered a terrific employee. She would help anyone in need. She was known to be a compassionate and caring person. Vicky was the person that you would call when you needed help with anything. It was said that her phone would ring day and night. She's the kind of person that would take care of everybody before she took care of herself. Out of nowhere, April 28, 2022, Vicky announced her retirement. She said that her retirement was to start April 29th, 2022, so just one day after she announced her retirement. This left her coworkers stunned. But Vicky's job wasn't easy. And after 17 years of working up to 60 hours a week, that weighs on you. Maybe Vicky just needed a break. Maybe she wanted to pursue something else. Most people in her position don't last 17 years, not even close. The strange thing is Vicky made another bold move. A month earlier, she put her house on the market for half of its value, and it sold. When you put Vicky retiring out of the blue and her selling her house for half of its value, red flags just start flying. Now we start to wonder, is everything okay? Is Vicky all right? Did something happen? Let's pause and go back to April 29th, 2022, the day that Vicky is going to retire. It's her last day of work. It's a normal day. Vicky had told the other officers that she's taking an inmate for a mental health evaluation. So she follows the normal procedures, gets the inmate ready, and they leave. The only problem is Vicky and the inmate never show up to the courthouse. And at this point, everyone is worried. Did something happen? Did the inmate somehow overpower Vicky? Is Vicky in danger? The inmate is 6'9" and 300 pounds. That's double Vicky's weight, and Vicky is only 5'5". At this point, Vicky is considered missing. They released an emergency alert to let everyone know that a prisoner has escaped and he has a hostage. They assume he took Vicky's gun, so they say that he's armed. This inmate is extremely dangerous. The inmate that Vicky was escorting, his name is Casey White. And again, there's no relation, just happened to have the same last name. Casey was awaiting trial for capital murder, and he had a long rep sheet of violent crimes. How could this happen? This extremely violent and dangerous man is now out there. There's discussion on whether he should have been held at Lauderdale County Detention Center in the first place, because they don't have the capability to isolate inmates, and it's believed that an inmate with his rep sheet and his past of violent crimes, that he should have been isolated. When Casey was brought to Lauderdale County Detention Center, he was put in A1, which is Vicky's cell, and this detention center is overpopulated, as are most. A1 is only supposed to hold 8 inmates, when at the time it would hold up to 16. So now the investigation starts. This is when they realized that Casey didn't have a mental health evaluation scheduled. So on Vicky's last day, the day that she's set to retire, Vicky broke Casey out of jail, and they go on the run. No one could have imagined that Vicky would play such a major role in breaking him out of jail. But now it all makes sense. It's Vicky selling her house, her sudden announcement of retirement. The police are digging, and what they uncover is that Vicky has actually been stocking up on guns as well as camping gear. So this seems like a planned event to get him out of jail. What else they discovered through the investigation is 1,000 jailhouse calls between Casey and Vicky. Now, I don't know if people always forget that these calls are recorded or if people just don't care. Because in these recordings, Vicky and Casey exchange I love yous, him calling her a good girl, Casey telling Vicky, don't give any other guy attention in front of me. And there's also recordings of them having phone sex. At this point, if anyone is in denial that Vicky is not helping Casey, it's shattered. So at this point, Vicky and Casey are on the run, and the manhunt to locate them begins. Now this manhunt is statewide, starting in Alabama where the breakout occurred. The evidence is leading them to Tennessee where they found a getaway vehicle. Inside the vehicle, they found disguises. Vicky would wear a long, dark-haired wig when really she had short blonde hair. They'd be checking in and out of motels until they made it to Indiana. And in Indiana is where they would pay a homeless man $100 to book a 14-night stay at a motel. In Indiana is where Casey and Vicky are caught on surveillance washing a truck. Of course, a stolen truck. So this is how the police knew they were in Indiana. They were later caught getting into a gray Cadillac DTS. And a police officer happened to spot this car at the motel. Police officer called in for backup, and while he's waiting, he sees Casey and Vicky leave their motel room and sees them get into the gray Cadillac. And this is really where the chase begins. Casey was the driver and Vicky was in the passenger seat. The police chased them down US 41, which I'm assuming is a highway. And it's reported during the chase that Casey drove through a field. This is where the police ran them and they flipped into a ditch. The officers surround the car and they end up pulling Casey out and arresting him. Casey was screaming, asking that they help his wife, and that's where they discovered Vicky and she had a gunshot to her head. Casey was screaming, she blamed herself, it wasn't me, I didn't do it. Vicky was rushed to the hospital and that's where she would later die. Her death was ruled as a suicide. In total, Casey and Vicky were on the run for 11 days. Casey at first was charged for first-degree murder in the death of Vicky. He later pleaded guilty to first-degree escape in exchange for that first-degree murder charge to be dropped. Now, the reason that they tried to charge him with first-degree murder, even though he didn't technically pull the trigger, they were saying the events that led up to her death was because of him. So Casey was sentenced to life in prison, and this is over top of his 75-year sentence that he already has. The capital murder charge was dropped 2 weeks before the trial was set. Regardless, Casey is not getting out of prison anytime soon. With his 75-year sentence, plus this additional life sentence, he is eligible for parole in 2081, which would make him 98 years old. Not saying it's not impossible for him to be alive at that point, but I think it's very unlikely. Now, as we discussed, Netflix has a documentary on this case called Jailbreak, Love on the Run. Lifetime also came out with a reenactment of this show called Bad Romance, the Vicky White story. I haven't watched the Lifetime reenactment. I did see the Netflix documentary back in, I believe it was last year, so 2024. Let me know if you watched them and what you think of this case. That's all I have for you today. Have a great day. Bye.